Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting, which is hosted jointly by the Physiological Society and the National Centre for Universities and Business. My name is Graham Reid. I'm Strategic Advisor to NCUB, and it really is a huge pleasure for me to chair this afternoon's discussion. We're going to hear about some groundbreaking work that has been done into knowledge exchange between the academic community and a professional domain. That's not something I've come across before, and it's a real delight to hear about it. We've got a busy agenda, and I am pleased to say that it begins with Professor David Patterson, President of the Physiological Society. So David, over to you.
Thank you very much, Graham. It obviously gives me great pleasure as President to launch this report by the Physiological Society and the National Centre for Universities and Business. From the Physiological Society's point of view, this has actually been a very valuable process for us in collaborating with you, Graham, and your team at NCUB. And as far as I'm aware, this is probably the first discipline-specific exchange that's taken place in terms of gathering information about knowledge exchange. And looking at the document, it's been immensely valuable in terms of the new information that has come forward here. And this afternoon, I look very much forward to the discussions that are going to take place. But I would just like to finish, first of all, by thanking you, Graham, and your colleagues for all the hard work that you put into this with the Society, and in particular on our team, both Andrew and Tom, I know have assisted you a lot in the process. So thank you for all the hard work. It's a terrific job that you've all undertaken, and hopefully we can get into some good discussion later on. So back to you.
Thank you, David. And these are very kind words, but they really deserve to go to Fariba rather than me, because she's the one that pulled it through. David, thank you. I'm now very pleased indeed to introduce Melanie Wellham, who I'm sure many or all of you will know is Executive Chair of BBSRC, and therefore one of the country's most influential figures in this domain. Melanie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Graham. And I'd just like to start off by saying I'm delighted to be able to join the Physiological Society and NCUB this afternoon at the launch of this report. And it gives a great opportunity actually to share with you all how important knowledge exchange is for BBSRC and for UK research and innovation more broadly in supporting our forward strategy and priorities. So I'm really pleased, and I think there's some really interesting evidence that comes through the report that I think we can all take inspiration from. If I can have the next slide, please. So most of you will be aware that BBSRC is now part of UK Research and Innovation, along with the other research councils, Innovate UK and Research England. And I share this slide with you. I don't expect that you'll be able to see all of the detail in the centre, but this sort of sets out what our vision and mission is for UKRI. This is drawn from our corporate plan, which was published in September 2020. And really, we're really thinking about the research innovation system as a collective, in a holistic way, as an ecosystem, where everyone has the opportunity to contribute and to benefit, and that we are enriching lives both locally, nationally, and internationally. So that's our vision, and our mission, in order to realise that vision, is really about how we catalyse, how we convene, how we invest in collaboration with our partners to really support that vision and to deliver. And I just want to draw your attention to the last part of that mission and how we actually can connect the research and innovation system, discoveries that are made in that system, to prosperity and public good. And clearly that is exactly where knowledge exchange comes in, and in all of its many forms, which I think are illustrated by the many examples and case studies that are provided in the report. If I could have the next slide, please. Now, within UKRI, BBSRC has a number of strategic goals or objectives. Clearly, primary amongst those are our investment in world-class bioscience research in universities throughout the UK and standalone institutes. Training the next generation of researchers from a PhD stage right through to fellowship and beyond is really important, but it's not just about that academic track of career training. It's also recognising that skills more broadly contribute to the research and innovation endeavour, and supporting those skills and acquisition of training is really important. Realising the widest possible social and economic impact from the research that we support in all of its forms, in informing policy, delivering public goods, commercialisation, really important. And an important part also in knowledge exchange is that dialogue with the public, which we really support. Next slide, please. And we set out our priorities really in the Forward Look for Bioscience that we published in 2018, and we very much draw on these in our current delivery plan. We've sort of got three key thematic areas. The first one is about continuing to push forward the frontiers of bioscience discovery. Physiology is the science of life. One of our key foci is understanding the rules of life. So clearly that physiological understanding, discovery-led research, curiosity-driven research is fundamental to this particular theme, and so fits really strongly there. And I think this fits with one of the recommendations that was in the report, and I'd like to hope we're already delivering and supporting part of that. But of course, bioscience, as well as pushing back those frontiers of discovery, has a large role to play in helping address a number of strategic challenges, societal challenges that we face. Everything from growing food sustainably and protecting the environment, to generating new ways of making materials and chemicals and energy, right through to an integrated understanding of health. And it's in this third area, really, where physiology is key, whether it's in healthy aging, whether it's in nutrition and health, or whether indeed in One Health, which is incredibly relevant given the pandemic that we're still in the midst of. The support that we provide there and the input and the translation of the discoveries that are made are really important. And our third thematic area is built on building strong foundations. We couldn't advance discovery research, we couldn't tackle some of these strategic challenges unless we had the people and talent to deliver those, unless we had the infrastructure to support those people and the cutting edge equipment and facilities that are required. But also we recognise really strongly that we need to work in close collaboration and partnership with others, and an important component of that is that knowledge exchange, and that comes through working in collaboration and partnership. The next slide, please. So in terms of knowledge exchange, hopefully you're already getting a sense that actually it plays a really important role in a range of the different priority areas that we're actually looking to deliver. What we want to ensure is that we're, sort of at the top line really, is that we are making sure that all the benefits that can accrue from the investment that we provide in research can actually be realised, and recognising that they're many and varied. And knowledge exchange is quite a broad sort of umbrella under which a lot of aspects can actually sit. That might be informing policy, and certainly we've seen a huge contribution from the research community over the last year in this area, in the science advice and the discoveries that have actually been driven forward by UK science. It makes me incredibly proud to have been part of supporting that endeavour. But also thinking about the problems that we know are still going to be there after the pandemic. How can we actually ensure that we're aging in as healthy a way as possible? How can we tackle the next potential pandemic? It may not be a human health pandemic. It could be a pandemic of a plant infection, which could drastically change our food supply systems. So we really need to think about those things, and as well as sort of from an economic point of view, how we can grow the bioeconomy and really sort of recover from the impacts of the pandemic and build a vibrant bioeconomy in the future. Next slide, please. So BBSRC has supported underpinning capability and innovation, which we have seen to be really effective in knowledge exchange in particular locations and in particular areas of our remit that we support. So many of you will be aware that we support 8 specialist institutes, which are 2 of which are in universities, 6 of which are standalone. And centred around these institutions, and the Babraham Institute is the prime example, and I know features in the report, with the Babraham Research Campus, we've built and are building research and innovation campuses with the institutes at their heart, providing know-how, providing facilities, providing capability that attracts, and it really attracts, particularly on the Babraham Research Campus, spin-out companies, startups, entrepreneurs, enterprise, to grow in a very vibrant way and really make a vibrant ecosystem in which knowledge exchange and translation and innovation really thrives. So we're supporting these across the country, and they each have sort of a different focus. If I can have the next slide. More broadly than this, we provide a number of different mechanisms whereby we can support the community to exchange the knowledge from the discoveries that they have made across the biosciences. So I've sort of grouped this here in sort of 3 different areas. One in terms of translation, and this is about how you can convert discoveries from quite fundamental research into pioneering products and services. Our follow-on fund is one of the mechanisms that we have to support that, and the impact acceleration accounts, which are awarded to universities, can help pump prime some of those early stage translation activities. In terms of collaboration through our responsive programs, we support the Industrial Partnership Awards and the Link Collaborative Research Awards, whereby researchers partner with business, large and small, and to jointly tackle some research challenges, some of which may be responding to challenges that industry has focused on, but others may be, again, part of that early stage proof of principle, really taking the development, research and development a step further. And finally, we also recognise that enterprise and supporting, nurturing entrepreneurial skills is actually really an important part of that. And we're thinking about how we can sort of broaden sort of the recognition of that as an important skill, which may not be for everyone, but lots of people will be very interested in. So we support that through the Enterprise Fellowships, which the Royal Society of Edinburgh operates for us. And also through creating and supporting new ventures through seed funding. So the UK Innovation and Science Seed Fund supports early stage ventures to actually see them through some of that early stage exchange of knowledge and translation. We can have the next slide, please. So I wanted to share sort of a few case studies with you, because just to give you a sense of some of the types of knowledge exchange and the impacts arising from those that we see across our portfolio. And the first one takes us back to Mendel, the father of genetics. And I really like this example because we all learnt about Mendel when we were studying biology at school. Researchers at the John Innes Centre have worked with colleagues at Imperial College, the University of Glasgow and the Quadram Institute, also in Norwich, to look at 2 closely related pea genotypes. One is wrinkled, one is smooth. In the wrinkled peas, they have much higher levels of a resistant starch. So this starch isn't digested completely in the upper parts of the digestive tract. And so some of it is retained and passes to the lower elements of the digestive tract, including the colon. And through studying the impacts of intake of this in healthy volunteers, they've actually demonstrated that actually the resistant starch from the wrinkled pea helps to smooth levels, sugar spikes or spikes in glucose after intake of this particular peas. And it's thought that it may be very helpful in helping to reduce susceptibility to type 2 diabetes, because we know that spikes in sugar after eating can be a particular problem. And resistant starch is one of those sort of areas where, particularly in processed food, they sort of seem to be, has potential for great impact. And if people don't actually realise they're changing what they're eating, but it's benefiting their health alongside, then I think that seemed to be really helpful. And actually, some of you might have seen it, I haven't, but this work actually featured on the Channel 4 Food Unwrapped New Year's Healthy Eating Special earlier in January. So demonstrating broad knowledge exchange to anyone who was watching that, I guess. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is one of the examples actually that was in the report on Crescendo Biologics, which was a spin-out company created from the Babraham Institute in 2008. Still is on the Babraham Research Campus, which is shown there in the photograph. And this is building on a platform of generating small human heavy chain antibody fragments, which are useful for therapeutic purposes. This work is being taken forward and licensed under a deal with Takeda, where they're using it to target oncology targets, so it's cancer therapeutics. And it's a really nice example of where fundamental science is being translated through a spin-out company and addressing an area of unmet clinical need. Next slide, please. So staying on the Babraham campus, another example from the Babraham Institute, this is the work from Michelle Linterman's group, where they've been studying the responses of the aging immune system and trying to understand why the immune system doesn't function as well as we age. And interesting, they've established a mouse model to look at this, and they've shown that in their aging mouse model, the topical treatment with an antiviral cream at the time of injection, the time of vaccination, provides a boost or stimulates T helper cell differentiation and helps boost the immune response. So this is actually quite an important finding and could help in thinking about strategies to develop vaccination to ensure that they're as effective as they can be in the aging community. And interestingly, because they have the capability there, they've actually used this model to test the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, which is now which has been approved, and they were able to show in their aging mouse model that that second booster was actually important in enhancing all types of immune responses from B cells and T cells and leading to improved immunogenicity. So again, this was a question: how well is the vaccine going to actually work in the elderly? These data suggest that we have every reason to believe that there will be good responses. And if we can go on to the next slide. The final example that I have is one that you wouldn't automatically sort of consider really, and this is work from David Beinkoff's lab at Durham University, where they'd actually been studying health span in C. elegans worms, and they discovered a link from their fundamental studies between gut microbial activity, movement and health span in these worms. They then sort of took this knowledge and set up a spin-out company, whereby they're now using contract research to actually test the effect of compounds on that might impact on healthy aging, if you like, and using the worms as an assay to actually test those which actually can help prolong health span. So it's an interesting outcome and an interesting use of the knowledge that they created, but could have real benefits, particularly in early stage discovery. We can go on to the final slide. So hopefully I've given you a flavour of the importance of knowledge exchange in supporting BBSRC strategy and priorities, both from discovery research right through to those tackling some of those big challenges, and the types of benefits and the broader benefits that it actually can provide. And I hope that, I think in the report it's 11% of university activity in knowledge exchange derives from physiology, and I hope that in another 5 years that has actually increased, and I think it's a real inspiration to draw on as well. So thank you all for your attention. Thank you. Back to you, Graham.
Melanie, thank you such a lot for that, and some wonderful examples that make the whole subject so vivid. We're now going to hear from a distinguished panel, and after that we'll open up a discussion with the many people on this call. But our panel reflects the knowledge exchange theme of this afternoon's discussion, because we have with us Dr. Malcolm Skingle, who is Academic Liaison Director at GSK, Fariba Sotan from NCUB, if you'd like to switch on your camera when you're ready, Fariba, and Richard Seo from King's College London. So we've got and Richard, if you would like to switch on when you're ready. Then after the panel, we'll be joined by Adrian Day when we open up the discussion with all of the speakers. But first of all, Malcolm, over to you.
Thank you. So I've been given 5 minutes to talk about the value of knowledge exchange and the work that I do with academia. So I run the academic liaison group at GSK, small team of 10, split between Philadelphia and Stevenage. And we execute around about 600 collaboration agreements a year with universities around the world. And these can range from postdoc agreements to case awards to large consortia, where GSK will work with a number of universities on our scientific challenges, or it might be that we work with other companies on a single university. In fact, today there's a meeting with Dundee Signalling Consortium, where 3 companies are engaging with them. And of course, signalling pathways are very much part of bread and butter that makes up physiology. The main thing that all these agreements have in common is that there's an intellectual contribution from both parties, and we share the outputs of the research across both industry and academia. So we've got around about 10,000 scientists in GSK. There won't be a single research team in the company that don't collaborate with at least one, if not more, universities. As I say, we share the outputs. Our field-weighted citation impact factor is always more than 2, which is the same as for a research-intensive university. We like to publish. And often we will use these collaborations to introduce scientific challenges to academics who then apply their lateral thinking to our problems. And in doing so, they get to see how we do our science. And they also get access to quite a few proprietary tools and technologies that help drive the science forward. So this in turn allows the academic to publish with us. And if you look at the citation, the bibliometric data for academics alone or academics who publish with industry, the FWCI is always higher when there's joint publication. So it really is a true win-win situation. I mean, I was a neuroscientist the first half of my career, but I've done this role in GSK for over 20 years now. And I do it because I know it adds real value to our internal science base. And at the same time, it certainly educates some of the academics into the art of what is possible when you do collaborate. So we work a lot with physiologists. I was pleased to be on this panel, and bioscientists at GSK. We also work with lots with other disciplines, so medicinal chemists, bioinformaticians, physicians, physicists, data engineers, and the like. And these are now morphed into multidisciplinary teams working towards common scientific challenges. As I said, I was a pharmacologist in the first half of my career. This was in an era when... I found this on the web. Oh, I'll just turn Siri off. Yeah, I was a pharmacologist in the first half of my career when universities and companies had pharmacology departments and biochemistry departments. I mean, they're long gone, and rightly so. We now have multidisciplinary groups, so that's a good thing. But it does mean that some of the discipline names and labels have been lost. And so if you ask people in GSK, who are the pharmacologists, they'll tell you that they're an immunologist or a drug screener or perhaps a molecular biologist, but not many people would say they're a pharmacologist. And I'd say the same is the same for physiology. Physiology is of paramount importance to the pharmaceutical industry, but we wouldn't have anyone in GSK who would self-identify as a physiologist. So I was very pleased to be on the advisory board for this report because, as Melanie has highlighted, there's a number of case studies where physiology has absolutely helped underpin the research base that the pharma industry tap into. We need to understand and better exploit physiology if we're going to address some of the big challenges. Topics like the obesity epidemic that we've got with us and the growing number of diabetics, frailty and cachexia, an ever-aging population, and even just the general wellness and fitness across all of the age groups. So we need to support physiologists, we need to support the related disciplines, the sports scientists, the physiotherapists, the nutritionists, the behavioural scientists, and we really need to underpin all that with physiology if we're going to have a healthier and wealthier nation. I'll leave it there and I'll now pass on to Fariba.
Thanks, Malcolm. And thanks, Graham. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fariba, and I'm a policy lead for research and innovation at the NCUB. I've had the pleasure of, everyone see me? Yeah. I've had the real pleasure of working with Andrew, Tom, and Adrian at the Physiological Society on this report. And so I'd just like to start the 5 minutes that I have in just congratulating all of my colleagues there for working on such a worthwhile project. It's certainly been a real pleasure for NCUB, but we're also really pleased from the angle that the TPS is leading the way as a catalyst for other learning societies. What we hope will not only be in healthcare, but to better understand their contribution as a discipline and what their contribution that makes to knowledge exchange. Our hope at NCUB, and certainly a motivator for co-producing this report, is that more professional bodies will follow suit and begin to understand better their discipline and the way research translation works. We know that the UK is good at research, but highlighting the value that research translation brings is fundamental to building on our strengths and on the road to economic recovery. It's important not just because it helps us to learn, but also because this report highlights a tendency in the UK that we as policymakers, academics, and even researchers themselves often make, which is often to criticize government for boasting about things it shouldn't, whilst leaving things like knowledge exchange open to undue criticism, in my view. In the many different reviews and further reviews of higher education, and certainly in knowledge exchange, we often criticize and undervalue our ability to undertake KE, but any objective analysis shows that we're actually good at this, as demonstrated by the 11% stat that Melanie highlighted earlier. And it's hard to call it a problem when the world is literally being saved from a pandemic by university business collaboration. You've already heard from others who have highlighted the incredibly valuable and innovative contributions that physiology makes to KE beyond the direct activities associated with physiology and bioscience sectors. So physiologists are also making vital contributions to addressing the UK's long-standing grand challenges. So strides to understand and tackle childhood obesity, along with efforts to increase longevity and ensure those extra years can be lived in good health. These are global challenges that the UK has an opportunity to lead on and strengthen our research base and economy, improving quality of life, both in the short and long term. I think it would be amiss, however, and despite these huge strides, to not acknowledge the huge challenges the UK faces ahead, even in areas where we have typically shown strength and endurance. And the timing of this report cannot be ignored. The NCUB has been working with the University Commercialisation and Innovation Policy Evidence Unit based at the University of Cambridge to launch a series of 2 reports which will highlight the impacts and lessons learned from the impact of COVID-19 on university business collaborations. This will be launched next week. Of particular interest in this context are the TPS report's findings that show that academics struggle to find the right partners or to find the time to dedicate to knowledge exchange. The impact of COVID-19 on partnerships may exacerbate these challenges moving forward. For example, our evidence shows that businesses will be looking to consolidate their partnerships and possibly move to more in-house R&D. With a likely global decline in business R&D investment and the sustainability of university research already under pressure pre-pandemic, it's important that universities and government funders have a realistic and robust discussion about what's needed for businesses and universities, working simultaneously to deliver key government priorities, including, and not least, raising R&D and innovation in the economy, contributing to leveling up, and supporting industries, economies, and communities in recovering from the effects of the pandemic and adapting to new socioeconomic and industrial landscapes. It's only by having the best possible understanding of the UK's strengths and weaknesses and highly optimized funding interventions that we can make the most of our performance. Of course, there's always room for improvement in business-university collaboration. And indeed, we must continue to improve to keep up with countries such as Switzerland, Israel, and of course the US. But we're already performing at a high level, and if further improvement can't be achieved by universities alone. So it needs acknowledging that businesses, large and small, need to have confidence in the benefits of university collaboration. Robust criticism is always helpful, but let's also make sure we celebrate the strength of the system where they can be found. And I think this report really highlights that. Thanks.
Thanks, Fariba. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Graham, and thank you to Fariba. So my name's Richard Xiao. I'm the co-chair of the advisory group for this knowledge exchange panel. And on behalf of my co-chair, Tim Curtis from the University of Belfast, I'd like to offer my thanks to the colleagues at the Physiological Society, that's Andrew, Tom, and also other colleagues that have been involved in the advisory group who are listed in the report itself. Many of you are in the audience, so I'd like to add my thanks to your contribution towards putting this excellent report together and everything that's been done behind the scenes through the society. Of course, Malcolm and Fariba are also on the advisory group, and together, I think we've all learned a lot through the process of not only putting together a report, but delving into the challenges and also the opportunities of knowledge exchange in the education, the higher education, and also the industry ecosystem. There are so many opportunities that we have discovered, not only through engaging with colleagues, but through our environment. That's this pandemic, and also a new mindset that has developed over the past 9 months. And I think the interactions between academics and industry are far-reaching. Knowledge exchange is not only about industry engagement. I'd like to give one or two examples of how I have engaged with both on the education perspective and also better informing the policymakers. So I think it's very important that the government acknowledges that there is a lack in the UK in knowledge exchange engagement, and how we can move forwards for the next decade to enhance our standing. You could say post-Brexit, it is very important from the global perspective. I know many of you in the audience today are from outside the UK, how we can engage in knowledge exchange between the UK and other universities and other entities. Not only industry, but perhaps governments, policymakers, and which will drive from the ground up this impact of knowledge exchange. So from the point of view of the report, we have identified a number of shortcomings, but also very important ways in which we can address these. And as already mentioned, physiology is the science of life. In my own research, I direct aging research at King's College London, and the science of life is the science of longevity and healthy aging. From my perspective, that's very important, and we have seen the impact of that through the pandemic. But how we can engage not only at the clinical level or the pharmaceutical level, but perhaps at the community level and the consumer level, how we might engage with those who are at the supermarket level. So you could perhaps have the perspective of better education, how we can all become much more aware of the importance of knowledge exchange and what difference it can make to the community. We all need more time. We're all hard pushed for time as academics. And one way in which we can engage with the wider academic community is through fellowship programs, which we have identified either through the Physiological Society or through UKRI support, especially through early career investigators, giving them a knowledge base of how to engage in knowledge exchange, all the way through to opportunities, seed funding, even with the global community. So these are some of the barriers that need to be overcome. And I think through the report, we have identified ways in which this can be achieved through the case studies. There are a number of them in the report, which I don't have time to go through. But one example from my own perspective is with Unilever and engaging with them in India, Bangalore, in their research center, which I have clearly benefited from. But we had used the opportunity to also enable early career investigators to go out to their research center in a summer school. So that was one of the case studies which really highlights the engagement between academics, early career investigators, and perhaps the industry sector, which would not have occurred if all three parties didn't play a key role. So because of time, I won't go through other key findings of the report, but I would like to say that this report is crucial for us to make a difference as we go forwards. How we can change the mindset, not only of the academics, but also industry engagement from SMEs all the way through to the global pharmaceutical companies, as we've heard about. And it's not only from the academics perspective about spinning out companies, how about spinning them in, working in an academic environment with some of the smaller companies, enhancing their output, and also engaging with the early career investigator community. So with that, I'd be very happy to answer questions later on, and I'm going to hand back to Graham. Graham, I think you may be on mute.
Somebody had to be the first one to be on mute at the wrong time. At least it was me. Richard, thank you very much for that. So we're now going to be joined by Adrian Day. Adrian, would you like to just introduce yourself briefly, and then we will turn to the Q&A session?
Thanks, Graham. I think a few of you will know me from my days at HEFGE, being involved with data and metrics of knowledge exchange. I'm now an independent consultant and have had just literally a fascinating year working with colleagues at NCUB and the Physiological Society, learning about all of this and getting really involved with the data. I hope, again, it's not been too dry on the way through. I promise you we could have had 5 times more in terms of the absolute reams of detail we have there, but that will be a lot more work we can follow up on with in the future, hopefully. But yes, again, very grateful to be here. I think it's a really useful contribution and very happy to answer any further questions.
Thanks, Adrian. So we've got David, Melanie, Malcolm, Fariba, Richard and Adrian now on a panel for discussion. Given the size of the audience, I suggest that you use the Q&A function as your primary outlet for questions, and I'll do the best I can to capture topics of interest and assimilate them into questions for our panel. If I could just begin by asking each of you to reflect on the challenge of representing the interests of physiology in an industrial strategy. Because the language of industrial strategy is not usually compatible with the language of professions, as several of you have touched on already. So what do we actually do about it? I mean, Melanie, you're quite close to this one way or another.
Thank you, Graham. Yes, indeed. I've been close to the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, which is seeking to help deliver this kind of some of the ambitions. And I think it's important, and I think part of the role that we can play is to ensure that, you know, these are really interdisciplinary challenges, and it's about bringing the respective disciplines together to co-create the solutions to some of those challenges and to really work together. So I think there it's incumbent, I think, on us to actually look to support projects that are actually bringing those types of teams together and recognizing that you do need those different disciplines and you need the strength in those disciplines to come together and then you know, tackle problems together collectively.
Yeah, and Malcolm, you're from one of the world's premier pharmaceutical companies, so that I presume that gives you an interest in industrial strategy. Do you feel that professions such as physiology are sort of the orphans of industrial strategy, or do they find a way in?
I think the industrialists stand up and be counted and actually say that the basic underpinning disciplines like physiology, if we don't have those, then we're not going to get to the more advanced therapeutics later on down the end. I mean, Melanie captured it when she was talking about the science of life, you know, that basic understanding of how things come together. If you don't understand that, then you're not going to be able to develop new therapeutics and hopefully help mankind.
And I mean, David, as the president of the Physiological Society, is this something that weighs on your mind?
Yeah, I also head a large department of physiology in Oxford too, and so we're thinking about this all the time. And I'd just like to probably, amplify the notion that, physiology is a discovery science, is classically a reassembly science. We operate over quite a wide spatial temporal domain. And I think many people have forgotten that often I like to say, in order to have been a big fish, you needed to have been a little fish at some stage in your life in terms of discovery. So, if you look back at some of the great discoveries that have taken place, and if we use the Nobel Prizes as the yardstick for this, you can see where they have evolved from, where the pharmaceutical area has certainly benefited from those discoveries. And often it takes 20 or 30 years for those discoveries to come through the pipeline in terms of being realized. And with an industrial strategy, often governments don't have that large horizon because they're concerned with the parliament. And our game is longer than that. So to influence an industrial strategy, which on the whole is mission driven and not discovery driven, we have to work hard with that. But what I would say is that discovery can come from mission too, and physiology as a subject is really at the center of a lot of this. And I think if you look at history can really give you some good exemplars of where physiology has underpinned that discovery. After all, it is the Nobel Prize in physiology or medicine.
Yeah. Yes, well, a point very well made. Now, there's an important point coming through on the Q&A line. Is knowledge exchange a pursuit for senior academics and business people? Or are we making enough of earlier career researchers and the contributions, the very rich contributions that they can make at the interface between the academic world and other domains, not only industry, plainly? Richard, what's your take on that? Is this, what can we do to give earlier career researchers more opportunity and, frankly, more ambition in this space?
That's an excellent point, Graham. As I highlighted, we need to provide opportunities and also training to our early career physiologists and researchers. As Elizabeth has pointed out in her question, I think schemes such as CASE and KTP are very important. And that's how I really started engaging with knowledge exchange, is through BBSRC CASE program and KTP with Unilever. And I learned so much, not as the recipient, as the student or the postdoc myself, but through the opportunity to engage with industry partners and even to have an academic researcher embedded within industry is clearly hugely important and has provided so many career opportunities for those that I have mentored through these programs. It's allowing time as well for the academic to support such activities. As I mentioned, we don't have enough time. It's for the senior management and the universities to recognize the importance of the next generation of early career investigator, and also to support this at an international level. So those are some of my reflections.
Yes, Adrian, I'd like then to ask Fariba to come in, but Adrian, please.
Thanks, John. I just wanted to mention briefly that, again, during the process, particularly around the academic survey, we ran some workshops focused on early career researchers as such. And one of the points that kind of jumped out at me was that people were very keen to consider the public engagement work they were doing. But when you talked about commercialization, that was considered to be perhaps something they weren't so aware of as being something that was potentially useful. So again, I think we have the data, we've made a lot of progress in embedding knowledge exchange to that level, but there's still, as ever, a bit more to do. So yes, it is that sense of trying to again explain that we're not wanting academics to sell out and just look towards saying what they can get in terms of money for the research work. We're looking for them to see the benefits of their work in the real world beyond simply public engagement, but COVID being a great example of actually how that can happen.
And Fariba.
Yeah, I was just going to emphasize a point that Richard's already made in terms of that really valuing and trying to encourage and motivate and incentivize certainly that you know, the ability of researchers, certainly early career researchers, to have experience in industry and to take, whether it's, you know, internships or graduate career programs that businesses might have set up themselves, or government programs. It's that porosity between industry and academia can just make a huge difference into how much an early career researcher might prioritize knowledge exchange in their career, but also the ability to then have the confidence to have the IP discussions about early research that they're doing, and also engage in the kind of you know, entrepreneurial spin out type I guess ideas and innovation that might happen from the research as well. So I think just having that that kind of knowledge of how industry works, and certainly, you know, we've noticed that there are big barriers between how and in conversations with our business members, between, you know, how industry might be looking at knowledge exchange and the way that they want, the things that they want to get out of certain research or research translation versus what academic teams might be doing. So just being able to speak that same language can go a long way.
Thank you, Fariba. So there's a rather interesting question come through on the chat line about is there a practical size limit to the size of team that can collaborate across the academic business divide? Is there a point at which the team becomes so large that management and administration become barriers to collaboration? You know, David, you mentioned that you're running a pretty large team at Oxford. Do you find that the unit of collaboration has some sort of limit to it?
Yeah, I think it does actually, but it very much depends on the type of science that you do also. You know, if you're involved in human physiology, then the scale of that is often different from a lab full of 20 molecular biologists at the bench. We typically tend to find a unit scale of around 8 is a nice number. Like for us, small is beautiful. So we do small data, not big data. And working in those smaller compartment areas appears to be good in terms of productivity. Like there's over 500 in my department, so it's a sizable department with the research groups. But I don't like to put a magical number on it, but I get a little bit nervous about mega size groups unless they're very well structured in terms of mentorship for graduate students and young postdocs.
And Melanie, when you're looking at things like Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund projects, leaving aside financial constraints, do you find that there's a sort of population constraint beyond which you start to worry about the size of a project?
Yeah, I think it comes down a lot to the leadership and also the support that they put in place for those collaborative partnerships, because I think these partnerships take a long time. You know, David has already mentioned structure. I think that's really important, but you have to work at the partnerships. So often actually with a number of projects that, you know, assessing the leadership and the approach of the leadership to these complex challenges and problems, and the support, you know, professional project support people can be really beneficial when you have big complex programs like that, and we've seen that. But those are some of the questions that we ask, and we interview, actually, interesting, a lot of our consortia to ask exactly those types of questions, because it's vital. Yeah.
And Malcolm, from a GSK point of view, I mean, when you want to form a partnership with a university, how do you think through the scale of the partnership?
Well, it's always it works back from the scientific challenge, what you need to get there. But I would say large projects can work. You just need the level of openness and trust and transparency developed up front. And you need everybody to buy into the same mission. So there has to be any partnership. Everybody has to know what the outputs are, what the scientific milestones are, and right up front agree that that's what they're going to work on. And I really do think, going back to a couple of points that others have made, I think the increasing the porosity between industry and academia, and indeed people who do research in the NHS in the UK, the more of that we have at all levels, the more we understand how we're approaching science, and the more chance we've got of absolutely delivering science that is of impact. I mean, it's difficult at the moment, you know, COVID times, we can't take any more people in to GSK. You know, we've got 280 odd case awards, we've got 311 undergrads, we've got 300 apprenticeships. That's nearly 1,000 people who need supervising when they're in with us. But we've also got visiting professors. We've also got our people who have got visiting appointments in academic places. And that always spreads to more collaboration, because once you start realizing the quality of each other's science, there's always other things that you can address.
Thank you very much to all of you for that. Another question that's being raised is whether or not knowledge exchange is essentially a sort of internal UK endeavour, and how the challenge of collaborating internationally compares with the challenge of domestic collaborations. Richard, would you like to start us off there?
Yes, thank you, Graham. It's a very important question, as I alluded to earlier, that the audience these days in webinars, they're from around the world, because we can travel via Zoom. We have Zoom lag instead of jet lag. But how the Physiological Society can support this, and does support this, through travel awards, laboratory visit grants, and so on, that we do also embrace applications and requests for travel awards that do include a knowledge exchange environment, or from the perspective not only of going to work in an industry setting abroad, but perhaps teaching, public engagement, working with governments, NGOs as well. That is as important application of knowledge exchange as going to work with industry abroad. So I think that's very valid. And we also welcome those from abroad to come to the UK. I think that's equally important. It's not just us going out. So the global ecosystem is important in knowledge exchange, not only in the UK. We have a lot to learn from our international partners.
Adrian.
I think just to reiterate as well, but you know, we've made a key sort of recommendation. I think that's one of the things we've very much seen on the way through is that, I mean, the challenges we have in the UK are shared around the world, particularly in other developed economies. And work I've done in East Asia and the Middle East has shown that these are things which, again, people are going to want to know what we know, and we are going to be able to work with them in order to basically solve those problems. And it strikes me there is a great opportunity there for the UK to actually build on, as Farah mentioned as well, the fact we are very good at knowledge exchange, and we do have these things in common with other partners, particularly given post-Europe and so forth. I think this is something which we really should make an effort to prioritise.
And Fariba, many of NCUB's member organisations are international in their nature. Do you think this is an area that requires more attention in future, thinking about the international dimension of university business relations?
Yeah, I think this was really highlighted in our the R&D task force report that we put out in November of last year. I think the need to bring in more foreign direct investment was really recognized by that group of industry and university leaders, where we're looking at sort of thinking about the 2.4% target. It's not going to be through UK domestic businesses alone that we can make that kind of attract that leveraged business funding. It's going to be through positioning ourselves in the UK as a viable competitor amongst the other, the Singapores and the US and Israels of the world. And so it's identifying what puts the UK ahead of other countries. We know that we do excellent research. We're leading the world in that area. So also one of our recommendations was to look at, where are other areas, specific kind of commercially based missions that we could set, that we recognizing that we are a world leader in, for example, biotechnology, for example, and setting those missions so that we can kind of galvanize businesses and universities alike to really attract more business investment. There was another recommendation, which is kind of setting up similar type zones, which Melanie referred to, the Babraham Institute, but we're calling them kind of innovation collaboration zones, where it's not just bringing universities and businesses together, but it's also really incentivizing businesses to come through R&D tax investments or incentives, deregulation, just in these kind of zones, deregulation, and also, other kind of incentives that would attract businesses, co-location spaces, that kind of thing. I'm really thinking those through. So new policy initiatives and new ways that we can really attract and set ourselves apart.
In the UK, we have a research excellence framework with an impact agenda, and we've got a knowledge exchange framework and so on. How do we ensure that we don't just serve all these targets and performance measures and lose sight of what really matters to practitioners? Adrian, you look as if you want to come in there.
I would say that, yes, that is a very good question that I've spent about 20 years trying to answer and haven't quite got there yet. But if you give me under 5 minutes or so, I'll come with a final answer.
I'm going to give you 30 seconds.
Obviously, the point is, thank you. It is the investment we've made. This is the thing, build on the success that we actually have. The idea of this a model of ivory towers and academics not caring about what happens in the real world is just simply not borne out by the data we have. So look at what academics say. The reason they do knowledge exchange is because it gives them new insights into their research. It gives them new ways to teach material. Teaching students and doing research is the fundamental business of academia, and knowledge exchange benefits all of that. So part of what I would say is, yes, we need metrics for funding. Obviously, Graham, you know that very well. But what we need to understand is knowledge exchange underpins all of the excellence we have in UK higher education, and maybe just a little bit of trust and faith.
Okay, I'm going to give the final word to David. David, how, as the leader of this professional domain, how do you ensure that knowledge exchange is about what people care about rather than what the measurers care about?
Well, we lobby Research England, as you know. I think REP has been useful, having sat on these panels in the RAE for a number of years. But I think the time has really come to revisit this whole metrics hunting exercise. No doubt impact cases have been very good, and I hope we would continue with evidence for impact cases going forward. But many of the other pieces of information and metrics gathering, for example, that takes place during the REP, as you know, that this is a very expensive and time-consuming exercise, and in many ways, does the mean justify the ends here? And I think there's some debate about this, and I would hope that UKRI would have another look at it. The world of universities has changed enormously in the last 30 years in the United Kingdom, and gone are the days where academics are no longer interested in commercial activity. We spin in, we spin out. And certainly at my university, we've spun out more companies than I can think about, but academics are now starting to spin in and partner with the host departments or research centers. So I think this is the modern way forward. Britain is open for business, it's world leading in science, and we don't do borders. We shouldn't be doing borders with knowledge and information. And I think that would really be my take home message, that especially for the government, we need to maintain that movement of people across national states into the United Kingdom.
David, thank you for that. We've just had a wonderful discussion about a report which really does break new ground. It's a report that is opening up lots of questions about knowledge exchange in professional domains rather than knowledge exchange between organizations. I think the Physiological Society and NCUB have done a huge service to the knowledge exchange community in preparing this report and giving us the opportunity to discuss it this afternoon. Sadly, we have run out of time already, but thank you so much to Malcolm, Fariba, Melanie, Richard, Adrian, David, and of course, Tom and Andrew at the Physiological Society. What a great way to spend an hour. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the day.
Thank you, Graham.
Thanks, Graham.
Thank you.